I'm Alexander Alich, and this is the Foxfire Podcast, where we explore shamanism, safety, and culture.
Alexander was recently interviewed by the journalist Rebecca Rosman, and we'd like to bring you their conversation as a bonus episode. The interview begins with Alexander and Rebecca talking about the newest census results in the UK, where shamanism emerged as the fastest growing religion in England and Wales. We hope you enjoy it.
I got contacted from the Conversation out of London in December, and I think the census findings had just been pretty recently published, and people were still kind of combing through them, and then they found shamanism made this big jump. I mean, it's still not a large number of people, but statistically, statistically, it made a huge jump. And the really interesting thing was, and I point this out to my colleagues and other researchers at Birmingham, and I say, well, here's the thing, though. Everybody had to write that in. That wasn't a box to check. And then the conversations get really interesting because if you think okay, so, Christianity or Judaism or shamanism, people might just check boxes, right? But they had to write that in, both back in 2010, of course, when they got around 650 people, but also, more recently for the 2020 results, which I think was 8,500 people or something like that. So, so they had to write that in. And that's when things... kind of went off like a rocket, I would say. Yeah. So, wow. So I did that article, and that's gotten close to 250,000 reads, actually. And the Conversation, people normally get maybe a couple thousand reads, which is really good exposure as a researcher. Yeah, it's really good. Their whole thing at the Conversation's about helping researchers kind of bring their work into the public.
To a more general audience.
Yeah, right. Explain it in a way that, people can actually understand us. Anyway, that was that went viral, I guess is what I want to say, and then it just went from there up to the BBC. I think you saw or read, listened to.
I listened to your report. I thought that was a great report that they did. I mean, obviously, what I'm doing, it's very similar, but a much shorter version.
Well, different angle for sure,
and a slightly different. Yeah, definitely. But she really immersed herself in this report.
Oh, Amber did a great job. Right. Yeah, that's also why I was asking you how you came to it, because that's how I started my conversation with her as well as.
Oh, yeah?
It is, because for her, it's her story to tell, not mine, but also she had a very personal connection to the topic, which is good, because it's also scary for people like myself, a bit, well, scary is a strong word, but this is a really controversial topic. And I've been in this now pretty much my whole life. So to me, it's normal. And my people I work with and my students and my clients and colleagues, this is just like our daily life. But for a lot of people, this is very controversial. It also can be very threatening, very confusing and things. And so that's also part of why I decided to go back to school to do my PhD, so I could actually bring hopefully most of what I've learned, through all the years into research form, because people say show me or bring the receipts, it's nice what you're saying, but show me. And so I thought, well, okay, let's do that.
I think a lot of people, they kind of roll their eyes when they hear about this stuff, right?
Oh, indeed.
That's kind of what she was saying, that's just a misrepresentation. And even in the way, like how you were mentioning the census, she says these questions need to be changed, the way that they're phrased, and just the way that we talk about these things. Like, it's not just, I don't know, just sort of some sort of demonic witch thing, I just think a lot of people come with these preconceived notions.
They come with a lot of They come with a lot of biases and fears, and then there's just there's a lot of stuff that's happened over the years that Yeah. And again, shamanism, unfortunately, in the West has gotten, well, it's had a lot of trouble, I would say, especially recently. So also just as a practitioner, and again, now as a researcher, when I say shamanism, it's mixed. A lot of people are like very excited. Some people are blasé and could care less. But I do I do run into a lot of really open hostility about things. Yeah. Right? Yeah, definitely.
I'm sorry about that. Well, hopefully that people will be more open-minded as the research grows and as the practice grows.
Well, I mean, the thing is, shamanism is here. It is absolutely here. It has been here probably as long as we've been humans. To some extent, at some point, we kind of went like, oh, there's something bigger, and we went after it. And probably since that moment, we've been busy with this. So it's never went away. I came across someone's work in quotes recently where she said like, oh, shamanism was invented in the 1980s. And I was like, really? Okay. So like just a lot of misunderstanding. And again, a lot of confusion and biases. But it's here. It's in the world. People are participating in things. And my research angle really comes in on safe practice and also appropriation. Yeah, those are my two things that I'm mostly interested in.
So we'll definitely talk about that as well. Okay. I think I have that in my question. So, like the regulation around it.
Oh, dear, right. How is it regulated? The answer is it's not, but I can tell you more about that if you'd like. So, but that's the first answer. So, yeah.
All right. I'll start recording you now.
Okay.
That's all right.
Fine. Yeah, of course.
Recording in progress.
Okay. So now you know we're recording.
Okay.
The first question I always ask, can you just tell me your full name, where you're from, and what you do?
Okay. Well, my name is Alexander Alich. Oh dear, and you've stepped right into where am I from? That's a little hard to track down. I was born in Germany, where I'm recording from today, and went to school in San Francisco. Spent summers in Oklahoma with my grandparents, and today I work in Berlin, and I study at the University of Birmingham in the UK.
Okay, perfect.
Sorry, that was long and really complicated.
Oklahoma, wow. I've never even been to Oklahoma.
Oh, it's beautiful out there. Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. If you like rustic, yes.
I think, I would love to go.
It's quite nice.
All right, so I'm just going to ask you the most basic question, or maybe it's not so basic once you get into it. What is shamanism? How do you define this?
Okay, well, again, that's actually really complex. And I'll have to kind of break that into some pieces because historically it's considered a survival-based proto-religion. And it's been found in many places in the world, including Siberia and Australia and parts of North and South America. That's historically. On a contemporary level, where we are like today in 2023, is people refer to this now as shamanisms, plural, because shamanism, unfortunately, has turned into a bit of a buzzword, for marketing and things like this. So that's kind of the both ends of things, so historically, but also contemporarily. But what the people who actually practice this, this is they see this, or should I say we see this, is something that is a way to communicate not only with humans, but also with the spirit realm and also the earth realm and the environment. And shamanism, I would say the defining feature in shamanism is mastering going in and out of trance states, or you could say an altered state of consciousness or awareness that moves you into an alternate reality temporarily. And that takes you again either to the spirit realm, to the earth, or with humans. And so shamanism is really the action of moving between these three realms through the method of trance. with the goal to find a solution, solve a problem, restore balance, restore maybe harmony, I would say.
What makes it a religion? Because I've heard people refer to it as like, well, it's the practice.
It is actually not a religion. Well, I'm not an expert in religion. I'll just say that right now. But it's not a religion. It's not considered a religion. And I think the main reason for that is that it's not organized. The practice of shamanism is not only unique to each individual, but it's also unique to each area that it's practiced in. And then it's unique to the peoples within that area, or let's say tribally, historically. It's going to be very different depending on where you are in the world. And if we go back to its roots as a survival-based proto-religion, then you've got all these different environments. So the people who are practicing in Siberia are going to have really different practices than the people who are practicing in the Amazon and the jungles, or in Australia, in the desert. So they're going to have different practices. The root underneath it is the same. You've got people who go in who are capable of moving into an alternate reality to help solve a problem. And basically that problem would be how to survive in these environments.
Mm-hmm. Do you mind telling me your own personal story of how you became interested in studying this?
Okay. Well, as I mentioned, I spent my summers of my childhood in Oklahoma with my grandparents, and this is, I think, I learned the worldview from them. My school year was spent in San Francisco, so I went to a Catholic school, actually. So I grew up with two different worldviews. I grew up with a very westernized worldview and Catholic, and I also grew up with grandparents who, took me hunting and took me fishing and, talked to the plants and talked to the animals and the stones and the elements and, just helped me really appreciate the spirit realm and also, the earth. Coming from that, I thought I wanted to study Western medicine, and actually did that. I did my degree in pre-med, but I became really disillusioned with how medicine is practiced today.
Why is that? What about it?
Well, I was coming in right at the time where, instead of, like in my grandparents' time, you knew your doctor, you spent an hour with your doctor, they knew you, they knew what was normal for you, and it was just a very different time. And when I was coming in to, do my medical school interviews and all, things were already reduced down to we needed to see somebody for 5 minutes. We needed to treat their symptoms. And nothing else. And it was really, I know the people that were practicing were not happy about this. At least most of the people that I know are not happy about this. And yet here we are in these circumstances, with things being very, very, very reduced and very, very, very symptom-based. I guess just things are very, what I have to say are very, very reduced. And this already was a bit in conflict with how I had grown up, because my grandmother would not have called herself this, but she was a doctor and could doctor, people very well. And so I really had these two different worlds, and worldview and conflict, with how I actually really saw people, which is, as this whole being and their spirit, and their own, I would say their own journey, their own purpose and why they're here. And then in Western medicine, I was confronted with that's basically, that's just a machine, so we're going to just, figure out the symptom and treat it. So, and again, that's I'm being really generalized with those two things, but that's kind of where I saw myself in my early 20s, and decided not to pursue medicine. The other thing that happened at that point was people around me started to really point out that a talent they saw, that I had with people, and animals and places, which I didn't see, for myself at first. Hard to see ourselves, of course. But I realized at some point that I needed to get that talent framed, and I needed to get it trained correctly. And it was at that point I went into a traditional training with traditional practitioners, which took me over the next 25 years of my life to learn how to work with my talent. Yeah.
It's a long time.
It is. And some places, some tribes, 35 years would be minimum. So for some, I'm a little undertrained, I guess. So, but it was 25 years to really be able to not only communicate with these other realms, but also to help people, who come come looking for help and support, or possibly even healing. At first, when I was first trained, it was just really how to work with healthy people, and then eventually people who were sick, and then eventually people who were on their spiritual path. And today I do train very few people to help them learn this work, and also with the goal of them being then of service to their communities. It's a long training.
Yeah. It sounds like it. I know that you said this. You gave an answer to this with my first question, but just to understand for like a listener, I'm just wondering, I guess part of what that training looks like, and then just what it looks like to be a practitioner of shamanism, to be someone that kind of follows this.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. What that training looks like, for myself, was going through a very intensive personal growth and development, along with learning how to master working through different states of awareness and consciousness, along with actually learning to work with different methods and tools, and eventually on to, how to work with taking a person or place or animal through a process, toward whatever that would be. So that might be healing or balance or something like this. So, that's it. So personal development, that's an ongoing work. And that has, I guess, really a lot to do with, working with one's own biases and ideas, and also learning to communicate well and all this good stuff. I think being in really understanding one's own view and biases is important, because just what our ideas are, our hopes are for working with somebody or a place versus maybe what that person really needs or that place really needs. And those can be very different things.
Yeah. I just want to quickly talk about, some of I think a lot of, from the outside, when people hear shamanism, they think about drugs. And they think, oh, this is where you go on these retreats and you take ayahuasca, and that's kind of the main purpose. Can you tell me a little bit more about what the role of drugs is in shamanism?
That's a great question, and really misunderstood in the West, because, even the question is loaded with how drugs are seen. And the fast answer there is, well, these are not seen as drugs to begin with. So we've got a really different worldview, to start with. I think that's part of the problem right there. The other thing is things are being taken out of context a lot. So it's being seen as recreational drugs or so. Traditionally, if you were very sick, let me start like that. Maybe that's a better way to approach this question. Traditionally, if you were very sick and other methods didn't help you, so other practices didn't help you, working things out through your relationships didn't help you, and you were really sick, you might go to a practitioner who might think the answer would be to possibly work with ayahuasca or peyote. And then there would be a really long arc with being prepared for that work, being supported, by your friends, by your family, because it's not only you that have to change, it's also the people around you. Let's say if you have an problem with addiction or something like this. So it's really, it's your whole environment that has to change. You'd go through the work itself, which would be, the preparation, but also maybe the ingestion of a teacher plan or substance, and then there'd be also support, out on the other side to help you integrate your experiences back into, your daily life, so you can really affect a change. And the thing that I see a lot now is people who hear about something like, Berlin, Friday night, ayahuasca. And there's a hope, like, maybe I can drink this and my life will change. But it's so much more complex than that. There's so much more work that has to go into it than just taking a substance.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the other. Sorry, let me add one more thing. Sorry. I think the other thing that's gotten mixed up here is that shamans take drugs, and this has. There's no base in that. There are historically some tribes who. The practitioner may have ingested a drug to help them to go into trance, what we talked about earlier, like an altered state of awareness or alternate reality. But then again, they did that for a reason. They did that for a purpose, and they did that with an intention. And, they did that basically to help their community.
Right. What are some of the other, are there any just, when we talk about shamanism, the other misconceptions that you run into? I know that's probably,
boy.
Just some of the,
yeah.
People hear the word shamanism and they hear one thing. What are the things they hear and what are, why are they misconceptions?
Oh, well, that's big. They can, for some people on a positive note, they hear hope, that's one thing that comes up. They hear natural, they hear, for some people, they immediately go into, very old things, paganism and witches and things like this, scary, things that are scary. And then I think the darkest places they go into the noble savage, actually. They're going to go somewhere in the world and they're going to meet somebody, who's going to completely heal their lives and, give them all the answers. So there's a lot more to that, that question, but I would say off the top of my head, those are the things that show up the most.
Yeah.
Okay. So, So if we look at how it's actually practiced today, I think that's really interesting. And coming back to your last question about, things that people hear and they think about is, I think one of the biggest things I'd add there is that when people hear shamanism, they think if they practice anything with shamanism, or they were to be interested or curious, or just attend an evening or something, that they would be a shaman. And I think this is, I want to break that down into 4 parts for you, because I think that's a very big misconception. And for some people, that's a draw, that would be, in a dark sense, that would be a draw. If I just take some drugs. I'm a shaman. That would be really dark, and that's what people do a lot of these days. But on the other side, people also get afraid of working in shamanism because they say like, oh, I don't want to be a shaman. And so it kind of just to clear the air here, I would say, there's kind of 4 different people who practice shamanism or even seek it out. And the first kind of person who would do that are people who are looking for healing through shamanic methods. So that might be through ayahuasca or something like this, but it also might just be through, what would look like mindfulness or meditation or grounding or rituals, or maybe going to a Stone People Lodge. So they're looking for healing for themselves, for their lives, maybe for their bodies, through shamanic methods. And I think those people also probably wrote down shamanism on the survey if they're really, have a lot of experience with that. There's also people who integrate, I'm going to say, shamanistic practices into their existing healthcare practice, like psychotherapists and coaches and counselors and things like this. So there's a lot of people who will pick up like a shamanic method or technique and add that into their practice, so integrate that into their practice. Another kind of person is somebody who this is really their personal spiritual practice or their spiritual way. So they do very direct practices with shamanism. They spend time in nature. They work on their connection to the earth, to the animals, to the plants, to the stones, and things like this. That is how they pursue their practice. And then the 4th one here is, then you have shaman, and that would be a lifelong training and commitment to work in service for a community. And so those, I would think, are 4 different ways we could look at this. With the last one being a professional training, if you're going to work with others, especially if they're sick. From people who come from healing to people who integrate to people who do this as a personal spiritual practice, all the way to people who want to dedicate their lives to working in this way.
Right. So it becomes quite broad's not the right word, but you can see how this it has quite a wide umbrella in terms of people who associate with it. It seems to me.
Oh, very much so. Yeah, very, very much so. There's probably. I could probably broaden those categories for you a bit, but just to keep it brief, there's a lot. Quite a bit. And that's also a little bit of why I think it's kind of headed into the realm of shamanisms, because it's not well defined at all. And then people, again, kind of take the best parts of it, like, hope and healing and natural and all this, and then they put it together with other methods, And I ask people, like, well, how did you get to, I don't know, pick a term, shamanic yoga or shamanic Reiki or something, and they just say, oh, I don't know. I don't know. So, but it sounded good, and that's where the kind of like a buzzword comes in. So it's really interesting as a researcher to look at, why are people attracted to this? And then why, when you add the word shamanism in front of something else, what are people looking for? What is interesting about this?
I guess then on that note, why do you think we saw this in the UK census was described as the fastest growing religion? You said, I think it was 8,000. It was more than 8,000.
Right. I think about 8,500 plus minus, something like that. Yeah. Yeah. Up from 650 10 years before. Right. Yeah. Why? Well, that's a great question. I think it's probably a combination of things. I think it's from the people I've spoken to, it's a bit of dissatisfaction, in organized religion, and all. And not just one organized religion. I can't say it's, one thing that people are moving away from. It just seems to be organized religion in general, so a dissatisfaction there. But the other thing is, I think also with climate change, with the things happening in the world, with COVID, it left a lot of people like feeling very disconnected. And, and then the other end of it was like now people are looking for something, they're looking for connection, they're looking for community, they're looking for something earth-based, they want to heal the earth, And the other thing happening in the UK is a lot of people I speak to are really wanting to like reclaim their roots, on their own land and their own, their own place, within their own culture. So I think those are kind of two things that are happening right now simultaneously.
What do you mean by reclaim their roots, though? Roots in what?
Well, so in the UK, there are historically the Celtic people and the Druids, for example, and those are not living cultures. In America, for example, there's a living culture. If you go to Australia, Siberia, those are living cultures. And when you're in the UK, that's not a living culture. And people I speak to, they just are really... They've got questions about that. Who were those people? How did they live? How did they live in balance, I think, And so there's a big interest in, I would say just finding their roots in a way that's connected to the earth and not, not disconnected from the earth. I would say that's.
Oh, interesting. That because then it makes me wonder, like, is this something that can you pinpoint what's happening in Britain to like the West, or is this something that is unique to the UK? And it sounds like based on that note, that is something that is a bit more unique.
I'd say the UK is a bit unique right now because like the people in the United States, for example, that's a completely different situation there because, again, there is a living culture. It does become complicated, because of the history in the U.S. With Indigenous people, First Nations peoples. It becomes complicated because of appropriation. It becomes very, very complicated things there. Yeah, in the UK, again, there's not a living culture there. And people are again interested in they're interested in the earth and the plants and the animals and connection. They're interested in community. They're interested in ritual again. They're interested. What does that mean? To connect to the spirits or spirit realm. Or to the earth. Why is that happening? That would be the question to answer. But it seems from the people I've spoken with, it seems to be something very deep, and people, when they meet me, I was trained in the United States. And I think that's interesting for people, but it's interesting not so much like, we're interested in Native American culture in the U.S. I think when they look at me, when they train with me, let's say, or just, talk with me a bit, what they start to realize is like, well, we want that too, but not from North America. We want that from our own land here. That's what we want. So, so in that way, I would say it is unique.
Right. Oh, really interesting. I didn't even think about that. Okay, so then I'll just move on to the next question in terms of, and again, we've talked about this, I think, with some of your other answers, but in just terms of your concerns about, I think regulation is the big thing I was thinking of.
Right. Yeah. Well, generally, my biggest concerns are going to be in safe practice and, of course, appropriation. I think the danger right now in the UK is that, also with the UK's history, there's a danger there of doing more damage to Indigenous peoples. That would be that. So I would say, people practicing in the UK need to make sure they're not mimicking other cultures. That would be important. And also to know that to connect to the land and to grow up what they want to grow up, that's going to take some generations to do. there's not going to be any fast answers there. What seems to have been there historically on that land, for the peoples of that land, that's been gone for a while now. And those things have been, those roots have been damaged. So it's going to take time to grow them up. So basically the people who are interested now would be really growing things up for future generations. And I think that's important. There won't be any, instant gratification here with things. It's going to take a long time. But I would say it's a good work, It's a very good work. It's just a long work. And the risk of appropriation, just importing things, and misusing them, it could do more damage to First Nations people, and that's a big one. So looking at another culture, like again, looking to the U.S. or looking to Siberia, for example, or the Amazon, and saying this is where we have gaps, I think that's a really good thing. And that way it's good to look at other cultures and say, like, we don't have that here, and we need to develop that here based on where we are. Because what we spoke about earlier was that everybody who practices shamanism is an individual, and every place you practice is going to be different. And then like every group is going to be different, or community is going to be different, how they practice shamanism. And this also takes it out of religion, because it is, or religious framework, I would say, because it's there's no central anything. I mean, other than the worldview would be the central aspect here. So that would be that. Mm-hmm. My other concern really is, for my research and all, is really about safe practice for everyone. And what this has happened, and the reason that I wanted to research safety and shamanic practice in the West, is as a practitioner and also a teacher since 91, a lot of people bring me stories about how they've been injured, how they've been hurt, being involved, with shamanic practitioners or, quote, shamans, or shamanic teachers. And it's gotten to be so much that at some point I just thought, well, I need to pay attention to this. And I didn't know what to do with it. I just sort of started collecting stories maybe 20 years ago, and it just became more and more and more. And when drugs became popular in the last decade, there was even more stories of people getting injured. So I had a chance. I met some researchers at the University of Birmingham. I was involved with a book project that they did, and was able to write about shamanism and safety. And when I got done with that project, I asked them if they would, keep me on as a PhD researcher, and they agreed. And I thought, I really want to go into this, and I want to see what's happening, because in a First Nations or Indigenous setting, there's a lot. It's very complex, but people don't normally get injured. It is a really different setting. And when these practices came into the West, and they're here, people say, well, it doesn't really belong. It's here. It's already here. It's already happening as a subculture. People get hurt, and they get hurt a lot. So again, I started to look at these aspects about, what do people think these practices are? What are their expectations? And also the people kind of, I'd say, in charge, are they trained? Are they competent? And all this. So this is the things I've been looking at for the last years. Yeah.
Right. And there is is there a formal regulation system around that? If I wanted to...
That's one of my favorite questions. So let me tell you, it's not a unified field of work. Okay, it is not organized under any regulating body. Okay, the title of shaman is not protected, and it is not well defined. Okay, there's no advertising standards, there's no professional standards, and as somebody who might be seeking out a practitioner, a teacher, you have to really be very careful who you approach, to work with. So what can people do? Well, I would say slow down. Look at what are you looking for? What is your intention? I would say also at this point, talking to people, meeting people, vetting them is a really good thing. Asking questions, and then going home with all that. Like when I meet people, I will talk, they'll come in and tell me what they're looking for, or healing or teaching or whatever. And we'll sit down for about a half hour or so just to talk about things. And then they need to go home and they need to think about that or sit with that a bit. I'd be really cautious with promises and guarantees. Right? I'd be really careful with hard sales, I would say slow, step by step, and like with anything, if something feels wrong, it probably is. I think when we come into shamanism, we add in the spiritual aspect. And again, we get in this mix of hope and expectations, but also some fears, like, okay, the person's acting odd. That must be spiritual. And I think that, again, is a bit of a trap there, that, just because somebody's acting different doesn't mean it's a spiritual thing. So, if you're going to work with somebody, can you work with them? Can you talk with them? Are they explaining things to you in a way that you can understand them? I think that's important. Are they giving you things that you can go home, and work with? I think those are things that would, really, really be helpful. And I think one of the things that is a big red flag for me is if you were to go meet a practitioner or maybe call one or talk with them, and you ask them questions and they say something like, it's too complicated for you to understand. Or you just have to come and experience it. Those are red flags for me. It is difficult to translate things from one worldview to another. It's true. If I have someone sitting in front of me and they want to get better, but they think the whole, the earth's alive, and, the fact that I communicate with plants and animals and stones is a bit weird. It's very challenging to translate that world view. Doesn't necessarily work. So anyway, I would say really slowing down, asking good questions, sitting with things, not rushing into anything. And again, I'd be really careful with promises and guarantees. Another red flag for me is if you do the ceremony, it'll change your whole life. I can't say that. I would never say that. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if your whole life is going to change. Are you on a point that you're ready to change your whole life? I mean, think about that. Yeah. Do you even want to change your whole life? Or did you just come because you wanted to hear some more about a topic, So these things. So, I think that's about the best I've got right now for you.
No, I think those are all excellent words of caution, because I do think, everyone, especially, in like a capitalist societies, you want to hear I just want a solution. I want a one solution for whatever my problem is.
Yeah. And we're both coming, we're coming out of this consumerism, as a worldview. I'm going to say we're coming, we're in this world that's based on consumerism. So, there sometimes people that I can't work with come to me and say, well, I pay you, you fix me, and I have to say, well, that's not how this works. This is really, it's really a partnership going into figure things out, together.
Right.
So I need to know your story, which you know the best, and then I have my training and skills and my relationships as well, and hopefully all that comes together that can help you. But if somebody comes in to me, and this happens sometimes, okay, here's a fee, fix me, I just say, I'm sorry, no, thank you. I have to send them home. I get that just doesn't work. And in that way, that for some people, that is part of their healing as well, as to realize that they're also responsible for their health, their work, their the things that they're trying to accomplish.
It's not something that's just transactional,
right? Yeah.
All right. I know I said that was my last question. Just one more.
No problem. It's fine.
I know you don't have a crystal ball here.
No, I don't.
But my guess is, like, based on what we saw from the last census in the UK, that and what you're continuing to see through your research, is that this is something that's only going to continue to grow. Is that your prediction?
I do. Yeah, I do think so. Yeah. I'd like to thank Rebecca Rosman for this wonderful conversation and for letting us use the raw recording. The Foxfire podcast is hosted and produced by me, Alexander Alich, co-hosted by Annika Berman. This season's theme by Century Music. Special thanks to Kati Meaden and Christian Roth at goyippie.net, Ellie Hale and Rhiannon Morgan at the University of Birmingham, and to the whole team at the Foxfire Foundation in Berlin, Germany. You can find us at foxfirepodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts. If you visit our website, you can send us questions or topics you'd like to hear about. We also have resources and some extras. For our release schedule and behind-the-scenes pics, we are on Instagram at Foxfire Podcast. Until next time.